Mariam had never met her groom, Hamza. The arranged wedding was put together and finalized by her father. No one asked for her opinion. The only explanation given by some elders was that it was a matter of honor. Her father's expression to her a day before the wedding was cold and unreadable. He simply said to her, "You will marry him." The ceremony itself was dull. Unlike other weddings, there was neither music nor celebration. Only a quiet exchange of vows in the courtyard of her family's home. Her husband was quiet the entire time and no one seemed bothered. "He is unwell," her father had told her. "Once he takes you home, you will meet properly." That evening, she was taken to her new home. It was a vast, aging estate with high walls on the outskirts of town. The paint peeling, the windows dark. It felt abandoned. The staff, dressed in simple, outdated clothing, came out to give her a cold welcome. She noticed that they moved in silence, barely acknowledging her presence. She was led to a large bedroom where the air was so still it felt suffocating. There she waited, but Hamza never came to the room that night. In the morning, a servant knocked and entered Mariam's room. He served her breakfast in silence. "Good morning. Please, where is my husband?" She tried to engage the eerie man. "Resting," he simply replied and hurried out. Shortly after, Mariam wandered around the house. The servants avoided her, offering nothing but vague responses when she asked about her husband. "He is resting. He is busy. He will come soon. That is what you people have been saying all morning. I want to see my husband now," she demanded from one of the servants. He bowed slightly and turned to leave. "I will inform the head servant, Ma." It doesn't make sense. A newly married man should be with his wife. Yet, here I am, alone in a house that felt like a tomb. She thought to herself and wandered off. She began to explore the building. The halls were lined with portraits of men and women dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces blurred by dust. Doors were locked. Windows, too. The air smelled of something faintly rotten. Then she wandered into the study. Inside, she discovered a desk covered in old letters, neatly arranged in stacks. An ornate wooden box sat in one of the drawers. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Hamza. But it wasn't the picture of Hamza that made her blood run cold. It was the date written on the back. Hamza Abdul 1977 to 2004 RIP. Hamza had died 20 years ago. Mariam felt the room spin. She clutched the desk for support, heart pounding. Her head felt light. This has to be a mistake. It couldn't be him. Someone must be playing a cruel joke on me. She stormed to the head housekeeper, shoving the photograph in her face. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Where is my husband?" The woman hesitated, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, "You should not have found that," and walked away. That night, Mariam barely slept. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, gripping the sheets, her mind racing. Who had she married? Why had her father sent her here? Everywhere felt still and quiet. Not even crickets could be heard in the deafening silence that had enveloped her environment. Then she heard a soft creak, a breath of cold air, the feeling of something, or someone, in the room with her. She sat up slowly. The lantern flickered. A shadow loomed at the foot of the bed. "Mariam." The voice was low, distant, yet unmistakable. Her breath hitched. "Hamza." He stepped forward. The dim light revealed his face, exactly like the photograph. But there was something wrong. His skin was too pale, his eyes too dark, as if they had absorbed the night itself. And there was a stiffness to him. He stood straight and did not flinch. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. "You are my wife now," he said, his tone scrawled. "But do you know why?" Mariam shook her head, not able to speak. Her body trembling. Hamza tilted his head slightly. "Your father and his friend Musa," he said slowly, "killed me." The words crashed into her like a wave. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not possible. Not possible that they killed me. Or not possible that you are here, with me, a ghost." His expression didn't change. Mariam was terrified. She nodded rapidly, shook her head several times but could not find words to speak. Hamza went on. "They both owed my family a debt. They couldn't pay. So, they ended my life, the last line of my father." He floated closer towards her. "Musa has paid with his entire family, and ultimately his life. Now, your father has given you to me, hoping to buy some more time or end the curse." Mariam's mind reeled. The disappearance of Musa's children and wives, the secrecy, it all made sense now. Her father had sold her off as a sacrifice. She scrambled off the bed, backing away. "I didn't do anything," she gasped. "This is not my fault." She managed to find her voice. Hamza smiled, but it wasn't a smile of comfort. It was a cold, damning smile that offered no hope. "You carry his blood. I must remove you, his only child, then to get to him," he murmured. "Debts must be paid." The room shifted. The walls darkened. The air turned ice cold. Mariam ran for the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. Shadows swallowed the room in darkness as she collapsed to the floor. She remained conscious but powerless, then felt a cold hand wrapping around her wrists, pulling her into the abysmal darkness. The last thing she heard before the world went silent was Hamza's voice, whispering in her ear, "This is only the beginning. This can't be real. This can't be happening. I must be dreaming. If this is a dream, I wish I could wake up now. Please wake up, Mariam." She sobbed. Hamza's voice was right next to her ear. "You belong to me now." Mariam screamed, kicking and clawing at the unseen force dragging her down. The more she struggled, the more shadows tightened around her body, like a second skin. Then, out of nowhere, she heard a sound that didn't belong. The sound of dripping water. Her eyes snapped open. The darkness around her flickered, as if she was returning to reality. The sound of dripping water became consistent, followed by the faint scent of damp earth. She kept swinging her hands in the darkness and screaming. Then her fingers brushed against a door. And just like that, she was back in the house. The room was different now. The walls pulsed like living flesh. The ceiling stretched endlessly above her, vanishing into nothingness. The door in front of her was ancient, splintered, and nailed shut with rusted metal. From the other side, she heard a woman's whisper, "Somebody, help me, help me." Her breath caught. The voice wasn't Hamza's. It was someone else's. As soon as her fingertips brushed the door, a violent jolt ran through her body. Flashes of someone else's memory crashed into her mind. A lady in a wedding dress, standing behind a wooden door, banging, screaming, "Let me out. Please. He's not human." Mariam staggered back, thinking to herself, this must be the ghost of a previous bride. Just then, a gut-wrenching wail ripped through the room and the walls trembled. Thick smoke erupted from the floor, twisting into the shape of Hamza. His eyes were pure black now, and he looked mean. "You were not supposed to find her." His voice was furious. Mariam barely had time to react before he lunged at her. She dodged, racing down the endless corridor. The house came alive, shifting and changing corridors in the bid to keep her trapped, but she kept running. She sighted a massive mirror at the end of the hallway and dashed towards it, as it was the only thing untouched by decay. By the time she got to the mirror, it wasn't quite right. She could see her father, much younger, standing with his late friend, Musa. Their expression was cold and they both held knives. Mariam's stomach twisted and the reality of what her father and his friend did to Hamza became clearer. He had been murdered and the two men buried the truth. The room exploded into chaos. "The debt must be paid." Hamza's voice boomed. Mariam turned and sprinted straight at the mirror. The moment her body hit the glass, the world shattered. She gasped on the floor of the study, her lungs burning. The lantern beside her flickered wildly, but the house was now still and quiet. When she regained consciousness and turned, the mirror was gone. In its place was a door, so she scrambled to her feet, hands shaking, and pushed it open. Dust and the smell of rot filled her nostrils as she stepped inside the room and discovered bones. A skeleton curled in on itself, clothed in the remains of an old, blood-stained robe. In its skeletal hand was a rusted chain with a pendant. Mariam's breath hitched as she recognized the pendant. It was her father's. The truth struck like a thunderclap. This was Hamza's bones, and he had grabbed the pendant as he died. "No, I'm not dying here." Mariam reassured herself, grabbed the pendant and ran. The house rumbled and groaned after her. She could hear Hamza's voice raging and screaming, but she didn't stop. She reached the main doors and they burst open to let her out. As she stumbled into the light, she felt something like invisible chains snapping off her body. The curse was breaking. She turned back one last time to look at the house. It was silent, no servants, no noise, no movement. Just calmness, with the figure of Hamza standing in the doorway, watching her. For the first time, his face wasn't filled with rage. It was relief. "Free," he whispered, and then he was gone. Mariam made her way back to her father's house. She found him in his study and revealed the pendant to him. Her father sat silent, his face pale as death. "You knew," Mariam said. "You knew this whole time, yet you sent me to my death." His hands trembled. For the first time in her life, she saw fear in his eyes. "I got away," she said, placing the pendant on his desk. "How? Look, you don't understand. He will come for me now." He trembled. At that moment, Mariam looked up and saw the grim figure standing next to her father. "He will come for you. Your debts will be paid and we will remember your good deeds." Mariam was cold. She got up and walked away, leaving him to the judgment of the offended. As she stepped outside, she knew one thing for certain: her father will be paying his debt with his own blood.